Rolex, one of the most luxurious brands in the world and valued at $8 billion today. Its origins can be traced back a century to an orphaned youngster called Hans Wilsdorf, who had his inheritance stolen, leaving him with nothing except his willpower to conquer his challenges in life. Not only did Rolex change Hans's life, but it will also be a game changer for the army during World War II. Do you know why? You'll find out in this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tick the bell icon before the time runs out. Quick, before it disappears. Did you make it in time? Well, we welcome you to How It Started. On March 22nd, 1881, Hans Wilsdorf was born in Kulmbach in Germany. His Protestant family, including him as the second of 3 children, maintained a prosperous business inherited from his grandfather, who traded iron goods. The early death of his parents made him an orphan at the age of 12 in 1892. Hans and his brothers got under custody of his uncles, and they believed that a decent education was essential, so they sold the family business to pay for the boys' attendance at a German boarding school called Ernestinum Coburg. Hans did not like this decision. He was quite the outsider and was often teased by the other boys and did not fit in because of his religion. As he got older, he understood that even though he didn't like the decision of his uncles, it became an important factor to his success. Wilsdorf achieved great success in maths and languages, which motivated him to travel and work abroad one day. During school, he became friends with a boy from Switzerland who would tell him stories of his birthplace, La Chaux de Fonds, which was well known for its long history in the watchmaking industry. At the age of 19, Hans left the boarding school and moved to Geneva in Switzerland, where he started as an apprentice for the prestigious pearl exporter. Hans's future transactions benefited greatly from the experience that he received here. Wilsdorf began his career in 1900 when he moved to La Chaux de Fonds to work for Kuno Korten as a clerk and as an English correspondent. He was paid a monthly salary of 80 Swiss francs, which is around $85 US. Kuno Korten was a company specialized in exporting Swiss pocket watches. Hans was in charge of ensuring that every single watch was accurate and winding hundreds of pocket watches each day. This job exposed Hans to the most influential people and their finest watchmaking practices, which obtained him a lot of knowledge. Even though the pearl company he previously employed himself at was paying him a much better salary for his age, his interest in the watchmaking industry was much stronger. In 1903, Hans moved to London, in England, and started working for another reputable watchmaker. At 22 years old, he was responsible for increasing the sales, and he successfully managed to do so. At this time, Hans was already thinking about building his own watch business and was trying to learn as much as he could to expand his knowledge and use it for his future business. During this time, Hans married Florence France May Crotty. One day, Hans confided to his brother-in-law, Alfred James Davis, that he intended to start his own watch company but lacked the funding to do so. Alfred could afford it and was aware of Hans's devotion to timepieces. Although Hans was still very young, Alfred recognized his potential and decided to invest the funds to support his business endeavor. They founded Wilsdorf and Davis in 1905. Their plan was to offer premium timepieces at competitive costs. They entered a long-lasting cooperation with Hermann Eigler, a Swiss watchmaker. Hans learned about him a few years earlier. Their collaboration lasted until Rolex acquired Eigler a century later. Hans spent the following years traveling to numerous nations throughout Europe to meet with several watchmakers. In the early 1900s, wristwatches were mostly worn by women and looked down upon because they were not precise in time. Pocket watches, on the other hand, which were popular among men because of their bulky size, were very inconvenient to use in Hans's eyes. Every time he needed to see the time, he had to reach into his pocket. Hans was committed to finding a way to develop the ideal wristwatch for both men and women: Rolex. When World War I broke out in 1914, Wilsdorf and Davis was renamed to the Rolex Watch Company Limited 10 years after relocating to London. On July 14th of 1914, Rolex became the first timepiece to get a Class A certificate from the Kew Observatory 14 days before World War I started. Rolex had expanded swiftly. They had more than 40 staff members in 1914. The 33% customs levy imposed by the British government in 1915 forced Rolex to relocate its global headquarters from London to Bienne in Switzerland to avoid taxes. In 1919, Rolex relocated its corporate headquarters to Geneva in Switzerland, where it is still located today. From this point forward, the business concentrated on producing the watch movements in Bienne and shipping them to Geneva, where they actively checked the movements' accuracy before adding their high-end designs and launching their products. Here in Geneva, Hans and his team would put everything on the line to further the wristwatch's technological breakthrough. We want to be the first in the field, and Rolex should be seen as the one and only, the best, Hans Wilsdorf. The Rolex Oyster. The Rolex Oyster, the first ever waterproof watch in history with a commercially viable design, was introduced by Rolex in 1927. Wilsdorf presented the watch in a very creative way because he knew it was revolutionary. Mercedes Gleitz, a female swimmer who crossed the English Channel while wearing a Rolex Oyster around her neck, served as his first Rolex brand ambassador. Following Mercedes Gleitz, Wilsdorf approached the famous driver Malcolm Campbell to serve as a brand ambassador for Rolex. Between 1924 and 1935, Malcolm Campbell broke 9 land speed records. Additionally, Rolex chose a few watch retailers in each town to serve as its exclusive distributors. The company gave them an aquarium filled with fish and plants and a Rolex Oyster watch for their window displays. Wilsdorf invested heavily in advertising after realizing that Rolex Oyster's introduction represented a significant revenue growth opportunity. In 1928, he worked with the British top model Evelyn Leigh to promote the Rolex Oyster even more. She was pictured wearing the watch inside of a fishbowl. The Rolex Perpetual and World War II. The Rolex Perpetual, an automatic timepiece, was introduced by Rolex in 1931. An internal bilateral rotor's revolution generates energy that the Rolex Perpetual uses to wind itself autonomously. By the onset of World War II, Royal Air Force pilots started replacing their subpar standard issue watches with Rolex watches. Their timepieces were taken when they were kidnapped and brought to the POW camps. When Wilsdorf heard about this, he made the following offer. If the officers would write to Rolex and describe the details of their loss, he would replace all seized watches and not demand payment until the war's end. Wilsdorf personally directed this project. The Hans Wilsdorf Foundation. No children were born to Wilsdorf and his wife, Florence Frances May Wilsdorf-Crotty, who passed away from sickness in 1944. To honor her, he established the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation, a charity organization for social causes. In 1960, he donated his entire share of Rolex to the organization, which still owns and controls Rolex today in Geneva in Switzerland. Because Rolex is essentially a charity, it will never go public, be sold, or have to file taxes. Rolex Day-Date and Rolex Submariner. When World War II ended, Rolex's stock immediately began to soar. In 1945, the introduction of the Rolex Date doubled its sales from the previous 20 years in just 1 year. It was the first self-winding, waterproof wristwatch to display the month's date. The Rolex Day-Date, which debuted nearly 10 years after his first innovative model, followed suit. The first self-winding, waterproof wristwatch displays the day of the week and the day of the month. These watch models are still in use today and are a frequent of the norm for everyday wristwatch use. Rolex released innovative timepieces during the 1950s. The Rolex Submariner, unveiled in 1953, is the most illustrious. This one was the first waterproof wristwatch for deep diving that could withstand submerging in water up to 100 meters deep. On July 6th of 1960, Wilsdorf passed away in Geneva in Switzerland. He was interred next to his first and second wives in Geneva's King's Cemetery. After he passed away, Rolex started to approach itself as the luxury brand that it is today. The company focused their marketing more towards being an exclusive watch collection for people of high society. In 1985, Rolex started to manufacture their watches with 904L steel, which is a very durable and expensive type of steel. This was again the first watch to ever do so, and is one of the only reasons for their expensive prices today. Everyone who wears a Rolex bears the mark of Wilsdorf's passion for design and technological innovation, which has propelled him to the top of the list of the most influential people in business. Can you think of anyone else who is powerful and diligent? Let us know down in the comment section below. Also, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next video.